Okay, we're here at the California Antiquarian Book Fair, February 9th, 2020, sitting down with John and Jennie Phillips of Evening Star Books, and that is a father and daughter bookselling team. So I'm excited to hear a two-generation story. John and Jennie, where is your family based? Where were you born? Where were you raised? Let's hear some of that.
Sure. I was born in northwestern Illinois, a very tiny town that most people have never heard of. Grew up in that general region, and then went to university at Illinois State University downstate in Bloomington Normal, studied philosophy, and then I went to graduate school at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and a couple brief sojourns outside of that area, but largely our family's lived in the Madison area since I got my PhD in the late 90s.
Oh, cool. What was that PhD in?
My studies were philosophy and mathematics. My PhD topic was in mathematical logic.
And does that inform your book selling today, your specialization, or?
Yeah, a couple of the areas of interest that we have are philosophy and mathematics, and mathematics specifically tied toward the part of the subject that's known as foundations, which is what I worked in, or of special interest.
Oh, that's really cool. That's awesome. When you were growing up, were there books around your house? Was there science around you? How did this come to be that this was part of you?
Yeah, I think from the earliest days, I was sort of a precocious reader. And there are also a number of people in my family who had sort of the collecting gene.
Oh, okay.
And so my grandmother and also my mother. And so there was always sort of this understanding of people building collections and doing that sort of thing. And then I always had a strong interest in books and reading. And so that was kind of something that was around for quite some time, although it wasn't until I was a bit older that I sort of thought of pursuing that as more of a vocation rather than just a kind of casual interest in accumulating lots of books, which I did for reading for enjoyment and also as part of the scholarly work that I did.
Right. And that academic work, what period of time did you have a career in that field before you started Evening Star? Talk us through that.
Sure. So it was about 10 years or so that I spent working in kind of the academic sphere. And, you know, that time was as I said, I was working on mathematical logic. And so when I completed my dissertation, I had two young children at the time. And my options were sort of uproot my family, move to the East Coast, for a series of short-term jobs in hopes of landing a tenure track position, or move into another field. And so because of the technical background that I had, it was easier to move into commercial activities, which I moved into kind of the field of software development, where I've also spent a number of years working kind of on large computer systems for financial services companies.
Okay. And then eventually that tipped into Evening Star Books being born. How did that happen? Who helped you along the way? What were the beginning building blocks of this firm being what it is now?
I think that probably the very beginnings of it were when I was first a graduate student in Madison, Wisconsin. There were, at that time, as in many places, there were still a number of bookshops in the downtown area at which I was a regular. And that's probably when I started noticing that there were certain sorts of books that some of these dealers were interested in, and acquiring those books and selling them to them, helping funnel books to the places where they were needed in order to sort of fund my own purchases.
Right.
So that's where it sort of started. And then over time, I was always aware of first editions and that sort of thing, but I hadn't really, as I said, I was more of an accumulator of books rather than a collector. So I hadn't made a sort of aggressive study of that sort of thing. But at a certain point, I think toward the end of my graduate studies, I started thinking about that as a possible as a possible sideline, and started investigating it a bit more and chatting with the dealers and so forth, and began sort of more than just sort of the casual scouting I was doing. I started buying and selling things online as well, because that was during the time period at which ABE was up and running, eBay was up and running, and there were a number of venues to sell books online as well.
Well, I guess that brings me to the next question. Do you still sell online? You clearly do fairs. We're here at one. Do you put a catalog out? How do you reach your buyers today?
Yeah, so we exhibit at, 6 or 7 book fairs, I would say, per year on average, yeah. And we try to hit both coasts and kind of north and south. So we're sort of trying to get into each region once per year, I suppose, at this point. The other, and so that's a large chunk of our business is at the fairs. But then the other thing that we do is we have monthly catalogs that we issue online.
Excellent.
Also, and we're always looking to build our mailing list and sort of reach out more directly to our customers that way. But we also have our own website. We sell through only a few of the online sites, I guess. We sell through ABE and through Biblio and also on eBay, although our presence there is diminishing, I would say, due to various issues with eBay. But,
it can be a Wild West on eBay. Yeah. Do you have an open shop? Or
we do have a shop. Our space is in an office park, so we're by chance or by appointment. But it is set up as a shop, and we do get people coming in, believe it or not, maybe one per month or so. As far as buyers, we have probably most of our appointments are for people who want to sell things to us, which is also good. But probably for buyers, it's something like one a month will come in looking for things. But it is, as I said, it's set up as a shop, and so it has the advantage of allowing us to have visitors, and we do get them, and we also get dealers coming through who occasionally stop in as well.
You can do retail when you want to do retail.
Exactly. And we've always considered possibly moving slightly toward a more open model at some point, but we are pretty happy with it right now, since it is strictly a 2-person operation right now.
And that's you and Jenny.
Just the two of us, right.
And how does that look when you break down all the different roles that have to take place in either a single-person firm or even a 2-person firm? It's still small family business, and there's a lot of stuff to do to get the books on the road, to get the books out the door. How do the roles break down? And Jenny, maybe you want to talk a little bit about your involvement now, and what are you bringing to it? And having somebody who's, in their early 20s, I'm assuming social media savvy and tech savvy, that's a pretty big boon for what you guys are doing, I think.
Maybe not as tech savvy as you might think, but yes, I do manage our Instagram and Facebook presence. I do design our monthly catalogs. I'd like to use InDesign at some point, but right now we use Publisher because I was trained in Microsoft Word in high school and a little bit in college. I do about 70 to 80% of our cataloging, believe it or not. Dad, I would say, does about 3/4 of our buying. Maybe more. I do a lot of the logistics coordination, so hotels, food, Uber rides, the boots on the ground work of the travel for the fairs. I will answer the phones in the shop. I'm probably physically in the store 20 to 25 hours a week. I don't know. Are there any things that I'm forgetting?
I think it's so great to have that kind of partnership.
Yeah, I think we sort of share things out, according to our available time and interests. And yeah, I think probably, as Jenny said, I still do a lot of the acquisitions, but she probably does more of the cataloging. But I mean, the interesting thing for Jenny, I think you'd mentioned earlier, she sort of grew up doing this. She started working for me when she was 14, and of course, at that time, didn't know a lot about rare books, but started by shelving, and there were continual little projects that she could work on. As she worked over time, though, she sort of started growing her knowledge, and then when she was in college, she actually had the opportunity to work for some other booksellers.
Oh,
discuss that briefly.
I want to hear about that.
So I work for the Bookhouse in Dinkytown. It's either Bookhouse in or Bookhouse of Dinkytown.
Okay.
I always get that preposition confused, so that was an open shop.
Okay.
And it was a really great chance to see what it's like in the modern day to run an open shop, what it's like to have an operation that goes on volume rather than you have 500, 10,000 or more dollar books. You know what I mean? And that was a wonderful experience. The owners there are very nice, and they're very eager to help people in the Minnesota community kind of grow their knowledge about books and bibliophilia. But after the book house, my senior year of college, I truncated it. I graduated a semester early and chose to take the next 7 months to work for Rulon Miller.
Oh.
Yeah, and it was a wonderful apprenticeship. I sometimes think that as much as I learned in the 5 years that I did book fairs, age 18 to 23, I learned that much working with Rob in those 7 months, because that internship was focused on the antiquarian, the ephemera side of the business, watching him sell things to librarians and kind of understanding where this material is going and the future of old brown books.
Well, what do you think about that future?
Oh,
Since we're on that.
I think that the future for old brown books and the hand press period is bright, frankly.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you can't replace those books, and frankly, they're hard to digitize. They've reached an age now where their material and their physical, handling is history, and you can't put that online. You can't put the book as an object online. So I think they'll continue to be collectible. And as far as ephemera goes, it is a rather obvious factor in the trade that's what institutions are quite interested in right now. And so it's fun to sell visual, bright, attractive paper, whether it's counterculture material or broadsides from, Enlightenment era Italy.
Well, it sounds like you guys have a huge range of material that you are knowledgeable about, handle, offer. How else are you continuing to grow? Have you gone to a book school? Have you gone to cabs? It sounds like you're participating in a community-based push within the industry. What are some of the other things that you're doing out there?
Sure. Yeah, and I think one of the things that I guess we haven't explicitly mentioned, but might provide some background on some of the things that Jenny was just saying, is that when the business started, we were largely focused on modern first editions.
Okay.
One of the transitions we've been making over the last 4 or 5 years is moving, we first moved into sort of more 19th century stuff, and now we've been actually starting to get interested in moving more into the hand press period. And not that we're, unfortunately, we're not getting out of the more modern books. We're sort of doing a lot of things. And so that's one of the ways that the business has transitioned is, and it's both, Jenny's experiences working for Rob, and also just my own interests have always been rather broad in books. And so when we started out, we were kind of selling the books that we could get.
Sure.
And of course now, because we travel so much, we have opportunities to buy better and more interesting books than we could originally. And so now I'd say our range is widening out. So part of that is, sort of for Jenny has been the opportunities that she's already mentioned, but both of us attended the Antiquarian book seminar. We're both also going to be attending our book school courses probably this year. And of course we both, because of the opportunities through the ABAA and through other regional organizations, I'm on the board for MWABA, so I get a chance to network quite a bit with colleagues in that way, and I think those are great opportunities, to sort of understand how other people are doing things. And everyone always thinks that their way of doing things is the best way.
Sure.
But of course, if you're trying to find ways to improve, it's most useful to sort of find out all the different ways people. And that's one of the fascinating things I think about this business, is there are so many successful models out there for how to do it. And I think there's something to be learned from each of them. And so, I think we take advantage of those opportunities to pick up on some of the ways that others are doing things. And to some degree, you're limited by, your inventory, the materials you have on hand, and your own skills and talents. But at the same time, there are always things I think you can find to do differently. So we try to, find different ways of generating those ideas consistently to help grow our business.
It sounds like you've got all bases covered and more. If you were starting the business today, if you're starting Evening Star right now, knowing what you know now, would you do it? Would you go for it? And what are some of the challenges that you think her generation and our generation, has ahead of us, and what are some of the things that are, the best opportunities lie ahead of us. A little bit of future casting.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, the reason that I started this and that I continue, and I'll let Jenny respond if she feels differently, but is just enjoyment of the material and belief in its importance. And so I think, yes, certainly would do it again. But as far as the future goes, I mean, I think speaking with colleagues, our business is not as institutionally focused as many of our colleagues, but one of the things that I see consistently from the dealings that we do have with institutions and from speaking to colleagues is it appears there's less and less book buying going on by institutions, and they're, I mean, the institutions of record already have so much of the material, and so they're always looking for new things, but to a lesser degree is it books. Not to mention, I think there's not maybe as much of the rarest material on the market anymore. It's already either in institutions or in the hands of collectors. So I think there's challenges that are being caused by that. For us, as I said, we're more focused on selling to collectors, and it seems to me that's a change that can be dealt with in two ways. Either your business has to be more focused on collectors, or you need to expand the type of material that you're selling to be able to reach out to institutions on a frequent basis and be successful in that way. And a number of colleagues are doing that sort of thing. You hear about photo albums and broadsides and all kinds of other interesting ephemeral things that institutions are less likely to have, and people are finding those and cataloging those and selling them to institutions. That's certainly another way of dealing with this. And in my view, what we do on the rare book end of things is really a branch of the antiques trade. And so, if you look at, I mean, and I'm not an expert on antiques trade, but certainly I'm suspecting that if you deal in antique furniture or whatever, a lot of your sales are not institutional. Right? The primary market for a lot of things is collectors. And so I think that even though the institutional shifts are significant, I don't think it's a threat to the business. I think it just means some changes will have to be made perhaps in how we do business, and you already see that happening today. Others always talk about the internet. I mean that's happened. It's done.
Been done.
Yeah, I mean it had a significant impact. At this point, I don't know that there's going to be any change with that, though. I feel as though we've sort of settled in now to that. It's been 1993 or 94 when it really sort of started, and we're in 2020 now. So I think we've sort of figured that out to the degree we can. It's had a painful impact, which many have discussed, but at this point, I don't see additional challenges being posed by that. But I do think that the difference that I sort of see in just talking with colleagues is around how institutional buying patterns seem to be changing. There's also, I think, the thought for a while that I've also heard is that some of the smaller institutions may deaccession material, and I don't know, that may begin happening as well, which I think that would actually be beneficial in some ways, because it would bring more
floodgates opening up of new material
into the trade. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens. I've heard of a couple instances of that occurring, but I don't know if that's really become sort of a thing yet.
Well, when we end on the future of this trade, what are your thoughts to close on what lies ahead?
Yeah, so I was talking to Rob about it, and he says that the trade is fluid.
Okay.
And of course, life is fluid, right? People come and go, institutions change, their interests, librarians change over time. And to access that fluidity, you need to show up. You need to show up at book fairs. You need to get involved in the book community beyond your own business and kind of put yourself out there. Because when you network and make these connections, maybe you can, partner to buy a bookstore that is no more, or whatever it may be, or you can, be an agent for a collection that an institution would be interested in purchasing. But that can take a decade. It's a slow burn, the book business. So I think that's the primary challenge that I see, is being able to stick around long enough to kind of be able to change with the business and grow with it and get in on the ups and downs.
That's great advice out of them. Collaboration, community, that's going to be the future of us, isn't it?
I think so. And one other thing I would just say is I think regional book fairs are still important,
Yeah.
even if they have shrunk from maybe their heyday. I run the fair in the Twin Cities, and I will say one of the big advantages of it is being able to tell young people about the book community in their local backyard, being able to encourage them that art scenes don't exist in New York and LA only.
Yeah.
They're everywhere, and to go interact with them.
Absolutely. Well, cheers to that. That is something that we can all reflect on and consider and be hopeful for in the years to come. And thanks so much, John and Jenny. We'll see you both for years to come, I hope.
Thanks, Car.
Yep.